Deliveries of Navistar's new International S13 integrated powertrain are now underway. The Federal Maritime Commission issues new rules to outline and simplify the billing process for shippers when it comes to detention and demurrage. And as the cries grow louder for a faster shift away from traditional combustion engines in favor of new EVs, well, it looks like there could be even more unforeseen snags. This time, it's an overabundance of payment systems. We'll get into all that, cover the latest recruiting and freight data, and of course, have our monthly check-in with our pal and Michigan State's own Jason Miller. For Randall Reilly, I'm Joshua Miller, and this is the 30-Day Reset. Welcome back to another edition of the 30-Day Reset. We're back here every month with a look at what happened in driver recruiting, freight, news stories, and we even take a look at what's going on in the economy and how it's going to impact trucking. If you're not already a subscriber to our YouTube channel and that sounds like something that would be helpful to you, go ahead, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications so you never miss a new show. And all that data I just mentioned and more is made available to you in a download each and every month. If you're watching us on YouTube, just check down in the description below for the link. And if you're over on our site watching, you can fill out the form below and download your copy of this month's data for yourself. Now, on with the show. First up, Trucking by the Numbers, brought to you by Stratus Strategize. Search activity through the first half of February dropped by 11% after a big spike in January that saw activity reach the fourth highest point on record. And after a spell of low click costs in January, there was a month-over-month rise of 9% on search and 6% on Facebook. And while there aren't any major changes concerning the freight market forecast, the seasonally adjusted trucking company revenue did rise in Q4 of 2023, which was the first quarter-over-quarter rise since Q2 of 2022. So hopefully the sharp decline in seasonally adjusted revenue is now behind us. Turning our attention to the load and spot rate freight data, although we actually saw volume growth in the short term, with flatbed loads in particular being the strongest we've seen since early January, when it comes to the big picture, we have another month with a lot of red. Overall load volume declined by 9% year over year and came in 36% below the 5-year average. Meanwhile, the average spot rates were down 7.5% year over year and 6% compared to the 5-year average. Looking at things by segment, dry van loads were down 13% and rates were down 8% year over year. Refrigerated saw decreases of 21% and 8.5% for load volume and spot rates respectively. And flatbed loads came in with a 4% decrease year over year and 8% below the 5-year average. Again, all that data we just covered is available in this month's download, so if you want to take a closer look for yourself, you can find the link for that down below on YouTube or by completing the form over on our Randall Reilly site. Now, let's get into some of the latest headlines. The first deliveries of Navistar's S13 integrated powertrain are now underway. The powertrain is Navistar's most fuel-efficient powertrain and also has the distinction of being the final generation of internal combustion products the company will develop as they continue to push towards zero emissions. The S13 is comprised of an engine, transmission, and an aftertreatment system, all of which were designed and developed concurrently to ensure compatibility and full integration between the systems. After testing an LT Series sleeper tractor equipped with the powertrain last fall, Paschal Truck Line's Vice President of Fleet Maintenance, Vic Norris, had this to say: "Very strong fuel economy, a good driver experience, and 100% equipment uptime." The Federal Maritime Commission, or FMC, have made new rules regarding how shippers are billed for detention and demurrage, which relieve any motor carriers who do not contract with ocean carriers of responsibility of said charges. The Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022 required the FMC to clarify who could be billed for detention and demurrage, and this new update marks the first major change to ocean shipping regulations in over 2 decades. Intermodal Motor Carriers Conference Executive Director Jonathan Eisen weighed in by saying, "The new rule will require ocean carriers to work directly with their customers, increasing incentives for faster dispute resolutions and bringing greater efficiency to the supply chain." And finally, as more and more fleets attempt to adopt EVs, a new problem is cropping up. Lack of charging stations has long been an issue, not just for truckers, but any adopter of EVs. But as the number of charging locations slowly grow, now truckers in particular are faced with the hurdles of varying charger types, speeds, and acceptable payment methods. In the US alone, there are currently 64 charging networks, and that number grows to more than 100 when you include Canada. To combat this problem, ChargeHub has partnered with ComData to attempt to make it easier for EV fleets. This partnership allows access to more than 20 charging networks for ComData customers through the ChargeHub Passport Hub, which touts a single technical, commercial, accounting, and legal integration, helping ComData users plan and optimize routes through ChargeHub's public charging information. And that's it for this month's news stories. Let's check in with Jason Miller and see what updates he has for us on the economy.
So as we look at our late February, early March market update, wanted to start off talking about the pricing dynamics in the dry van sector. There was a little bit of optimism in January as we saw dry van spot rates increase that maybe the market was starting to think about turning. Unfortunately, it appears that was just the result of that polar vortex in the middle of the month. February, we saw dry van spot rates, including fuel, drop about 7 cents per mile. When you think about the fact diesel went up, that looks even worse than that headline number would suggest. And if we take a look, what that does is we take that sort of relationship between broker buy contract rates and then dry van spot rates using data from DAT Freight and Analytics. What we're seeing is that really brought that ratio back to solidly bear market territory based on something that I call the spot market cycle indicator. And as we can see here, if 10% is kind of the threshold to where the market switches from bull to bear and vice versa, we're nowhere near that 10% figure right now. We're at about 18.8. So what I would say is for folks who are hoping for a late Q1 or early 2Q switch to in the market from bear to bull, unfortunately, I don't see that happening. The data is just not supporting it. And so the question then is, of course, why are we not seeing the switch yet? And the answer is it's all about demand. And the seasonally adjusted trucking ton-mile index that I co-authored with Yen Boy at the University of Tennessee, the data here runs through December. It's just been a weak second half of 2023. I mean, believe it or not, weaker than the first half. And there's no real signs yet of a substantial increase in freight volumes. January's manufacturing data from the Federal Reserve Board was quite weak, so we know January ton miles are going to show up as a poor reading. And even the February data from the regional Fed banks is still not showing any type of substantial uptick in manufacturing. That is what we're going to really need to exit the current bear market that we're in. But then that's the demand side. What about the supply side? And the reality is that we're just not seeing evidence yet of a substantial leakage of capacity and a substantial decline in capacity that we would need for this market to right itself. And of course, that brings up the questions why. And the answer to that, I think, partly be found by some recent data that came out in something called the Service Annual Survey that the Census Bureau does. This is a mandatory survey, so you're required by law to complete it. And this is a survey that goes out to every large trucking company and a random sample of smaller firms that ask questions about revenue and various expenses. What we saw is if we take a look at revenue less expenses, data for 2022, the most recent year that we have, surprising to me, actually showed 2022 is the all-time record year in terms of profits. So if we take revenue less expenses, call that profits, that came out to about $90 billion for the trucking industry off of a shocking $550 billion of revenue. So over $500 billion of revenue earned by motor carriers just in the for-hire sector in 2022. That $90 billion of revenue less expenses, if you go back to 2018, the prior peak bull market, that number was about $50 billion. So we're talking almost double the profitability. When you then add in 2021 was almost $70 billion of revenue less expenses, you have essentially an abnormal extra year of profits baked in. And the reason I bring that up is that has given carriers on aggregate much more essentially cushion to float through this down market. And so as we move into 2024, yes, there will be, carriers exiting. But again, I don't see this mass exodus of capacity that would be needed to try to balance the market right now from a supply and demand standpoint. So to me, what I'm looking at is any signs that we're going to start seeing a major uptick in manufacturing activity that would be needed to give us the freight volumes to break out of the current bear cycle. So I wish I had better news for you, but it's still a little gloomy right now. Hopefully by next month, we'll start to see some green shoots and maybe some better chance of a second half recovery.
Thanks for that update, Jason. If you'd like to spend some more time studying that data Jason just discussed, all the slides featured are, again, they're available as part of that 30-day reset download, available in the description on YouTube or just below the video player by filling out that form if you're watching us over on the Randall Reilly site. There's also a consultation link available, so if you'd like to talk to someone on our team about how we can help, let us know. That's going to do it for us on this episode of the 30-day reset, but we will be back next month with another edition. Until then, thanks for watching. Hey everybody, thanks for watching our show today. Hope it's been useful to you and I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to watch more of our content, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Basically, if there's a button, a bell, anything, click it, could you? If you want to watch more of our videos, you could start by watching down right there. That was chosen specifically for you. Not your cup of tea? How about that? Digging Deeper with my good buddy Dave. Those are available right now. See you next time on another 30-day reset. Okay, bye.